Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy.
Hey guys, this is episode 308 of The Team House. I'm Jack, here with Dave, and our guest on tonight's show is Hugh Keir. He served in three deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, a couple to Northern Ireland, and he is also the host of the H-Hour podcast. And Hugh, before we jump into the interview, man, H-Hour, I sense, is it somewhat of a similar mission statement to what we do here, except on the other side of the pond?
Yeah, it seems like it. I think there's definitely crossover between the two, and it's you've got a long form going on. It sounds like you interview people you're pretty much interested in, predominantly from a military or military adjacent background. So I think seems pretty similar, except mine are mostly Brits and yours are mostly American.
What kind of Brits do you have on your podcast?
Oh man, well, it started off, predominantly my network is predominantly ex-military and ex-military male. So it started off ex-military, ex-military male, and now I go into all sorts of different areas. So from experts in psychedelics and medicine and psychology, politicians, musicians.
Okay.
It's still predominantly ex-mil.
Okay.
But as it goes, the bigger the network gets, the more access you've got to other people. You think, they'd be a good chat too,
That's awesome. Well, yeah, congratulations. I hope people will go check out H-Hour, get a different perspective on a similar topic, right? But Hugh, let's start off. I want to hear a little bit about you. Tell us about, how you grew up and how that took you towards the British military.
That's a good question. So I think a lot of people who end up in the military do so because they've got family who are in the military, and it's kind of almost a rite of passage in some families, or it's expected. It wasn't the case for me. I grew up in Wales, which is part of the United Kingdom. Next to England, but it's definitely not in England. It's not to be confused. And there's no love lost between the two countries, right? And I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, like 3 or 4 miles away from the nearest neighbour. There was literally no one around. So I spent a lot of my time out and about doing what you do when all you've got is countryside, and your dad's a keen countryside enthusiast in the most positive way. I mean that. So we went out rambling. He was out showing me how to shoot and just learning all about it. So that's where I grew up. And I basically ended up, initially I wanted to join the Air Force, which is obviously not where I ended up. I'm not sure why I wanted to join the Air Force, but I think I had a feeling that I wasn't really happy with myself. I was quite low self-esteem, really low self-confidence. Not quite sure what it is. I think it's because I had quite an isolated upbringing in terms of like social opportunities. Like there was animals, there wasn't many kids,
Yeah.
when and they don't talk very much. They talk a little bit, but I haven't a clue what they're saying. But when you grow up, most people, they grow up and they finish school and they're out socializing with their friends, and then on the weekend they're socializing with their friends. And I didn't really have that. So I think my social skills development was just really poor. And I think that as you grow up and you become a teenager and you just more of these interactions expected, and like social status becomes a conscious thing, and the way you interact with other people and they interact with you actually impacts how positive or negative you feel about yourself. I think it really impacted me. So I was really low self-confidence, low self-esteem going into my teens. And I think that I saw the military as an opportunity to sort of prove myself to myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Really, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It wasn't for anyone else. It was kind of to prove to myself, hey, you're not a loser. You've got something about you. And really, the only thing I had going about me at the time was I was pretty fit. I was physically fit, but physically fit from the waist down. Like from the waist up, it was just skin and bone. From the waist down, I had thighs like tree trunks just from running on all the hills when I was growing up, And so South Wales, looking at the RAF, the Royal Air Force, I think I wanted to go into aviation engineer or something random like this that I'd seen in a book about career opportunities in school. I needed A levels for that, which is our like college qualifications. I don't know what you call them over there, but it's, you know, you go from your normal school stuff into college. Needed A levels. It's a couple of years to do that, and I got college royally wrong. One, I wasn't paying attention, and two, I set up a website. This is like the 90s, so I was way ahead of the curve. I set up a website which was neathcollegesucks.co.uk, and it wasn't too bad about the college. And I thought I'd been really clever and hiding my track, but I wasn't. And I had to leave the college before I was pushed. So I wish I had still had that website, but I don't anymore. And so I left. I had no A levels. I couldn't join what I wanted to do in the RAF. And there was an advert on TV at the time for saying, I'll go and spend 24 hours with the Paras. I had very little knowledge of the Paras or any of the military, really. And I went and spent 24 hours down in a place called Aldershot, which is in England. It's not too far from London. And that was the home of the Paras at the time. And you basically go and spend 24 hours. They show you all the nice shiny weapon systems and the nice uniforms and a lot of the guys who were serving at the time. And you do all the cool military stuff, none of the horrible military stuff. And there was a fitness assessment, which was basically a run, a mile and a half. It was a mile and a half warm up, and then a mile and a half best effort, and I won that. And then I thought, yeah, that's it. I'm going to join the Paras, and I signed up for that immediately. But it took me about 6 months before I could even start training, because my mother's Irish, so Republic of Ireland, and it meant extended security checks.
Clearance.
Because at the time it was sort of the tail end. It was coming to the tail end of the Northern Ireland, the Troubles, as they're known over here. We still had an active operation going on in Northern Ireland, and they needed to cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure I wasn't the wrong kind of person getting into the British military. There was a lot of people got left off the family tree when that when that application was submitted. It's like the reality is that the island's so small, you know. It's that
everyone's related,
but be related to a terrorist, like a member of the IRA, or at least someone who helped them a few times. And there's at least one person I knew at the time he was I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 years older than me, and he used to be a getaway driver for the IRA after they'd been dropping bombs off and things. That was his claim to fame, so to speak.
So there's a little bit of fiction on your entrance clearance there, but that is an interesting thing, and something interesting that the British government did have to deal with, right? I mean, I can understand that they'd be concerned about that.
Yeah, the reality is that we were, until very recently in our history in the UK, we were having terrorist bombings on home soil by people who were born in the UK.
Yeah.
Or they were south of the border in Ireland. So you've got Northern Ireland, and you've got the island of Ireland, and you've got Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and you've got below that is the Republic of Ireland. And the terrorists want that to be reunited, and they don't want the UK to be any part of it. And they were planting bombs and blowing people up in the UK, London, Birmingham, Aldershot, different places. They were doing it in Northern Ireland as well, but that wasn't that long ago. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. I was growing up in times like that. These days, you think of terrorism, you think it comes from overseas, as in it comes from a country which they don't look like you, they don't speak the same language, and they can't possibly understand your culture. And the reality is, it wasn't. It was homegrown, so to speak, and it made for pretty challenging operations. When you go out to do counterinsurgency operations or any kind of operation against an enemy who speaks exactly like you speak, they grew up in the same culture you did. They know exactly how you operate. They don't look that much differently. They don't dress that much differently. Really difficult. Really difficult. Turns out we're pretty cunning.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into that a bit. But so you joined the Paras. Tell us about your intake. What kind of selection process there is, a training to just get into this unit.
Yeah. So on paper, I think the first two phases of joining an infantry unit in the British Army, you've got a phase 1 and a phase 2, right? Pretty much for everyone. And phase 1 is basic infantry skills, and in phase 2 you'd normally you start specialising in the trades. If you weren't going to infantry, if you're going to engineers or something like that, then phase 2 would be orientated around that. And then some other units will have a phase 3 where there's extended learning, particularly technical fields, infantry. So it was just phase 1 and phase 2. With the difference being for the paras, different to every other infantry unit in the British Army, is that we have a selection at the end of phase 2. So it's not just a case of, okay, pass your basic tests and demonstrate your basic knowledge in phase 1 and phase 2, and you're into unit. Yes, you've got to demonstrate those as a minimum. And then do your selection at the end, and then maybe you'll be selected. Even if you pass the selection, you maybe failed. But just ignoring that for a second, so the phase 1, the phase 2 takes about 8 months, 7 or 8 months. I think it's still the same now.
Oh, it's a long course.
7 months start to finish. Yeah. I think phase 1 is like 12 weeks. The first 6 weeks you're on camp. You don't get to go home, and then after the 6-week period, you have like a sort of the first formal piece of, hey, you know your basics now, and you do a little parade on the parade square, and you get given like I think at that point we got given like a maroon beret. You had the paras cap badge on it, but it had like a green backing stuck behind it to demonstrate that you weren't real paras, just in training. But you get to wear the beret and the cap badge, and you wear that then continuously throughout. For me, the first 12 weeks. Phase 1 were pretty all right, I thought. I didn't find it difficult. I don't recall finding it difficult. I think the instructors I had, I would describe them as pretty easygoing. You guys will know, your experience in training will differ to the next guy you went through, all dependent on the year you went through, who you had instructing you. Did you have decent guys? Did you have lunatics? Did you have violent guys? Did you have people who took no bullshit? Or did you have people who didn't really want to be there? And for me, in that phase 1, I had a bunch of guys they were great instructors. They were just pretty laid back. I thought for most of them, or at least the section commander I had, who was in charge of my 10, 12 guys, was super laid back. The problem with that for me was that was not setting me up well for phase 2, which was like carnage. I went from having this laid back crew to going to phase 2 and just having a bunch of like psychopaths. So I kind of left phase 1 after that 12 weeks, still kind of being the low self-esteem, low self-confidence guy, but not realizing it. It's like this false sense of confidence that gives me, I've done 12 weeks, I'm a real soldier now, and I wasn't. Phase 2 became batshit, and also it was a change in location as well. So our phase 1 time was done in the Birmingham area, which is like west of England, and there's not a lot of hills there. There's not a lot of mountains, so the training area is pretty limited. And the phase 2, we moved up to an area called Herrick, which is in North Yorkshire, and North Yorkshire is north of England. It's cold, it's miserable. That's why everyone in North England is like pretty tough, because they just have to deal with hardship, like people from Boston, right? They just grow up in misery, so they just like these stoic, hardcore people. It's like north of England. It's the same with Wales. In Wales, is the same. It's just miserable. Ireland too. And so we had like that change in scenery, change in surroundings, and up to phase 2, where we went to phase 2. Stop me if you want me to stop.
No, please continue.
Yeah.
Cool. So when we went to phase 2, the change in surroundings was also that the paras training location there on the barracks, Heli's barracks it was called at the time, or was at the time, it was right next to, it was on a massive camp, a big training camp, and there were lots of other units there, lots and lots of other units there. So one of the reasons that it was kind of quite chaotic and quite a lot tougher, I'd say, dealing with the staff that I had anyway, is that not only they were trying to train us in being the best that we could be to go to the units, they were also trying to teach us to absolutely detest and loathe anyone that wasn't like in training to be in the paras, or even any soldier who wasn't wearing that cap badge. It was you literally don't speak to them, you don't look at them, they're not worthy of your attention. And we were recruits, we told this, and I kind of got it. It's like one of the differences we have, one of the advantages we have, I think, well, it is an advantage, is that para recruits go all the way through. We were only trained, predominantly only, anyway, most of us are only trained by other paras. So all other units, they'll be trained by anyone. So if I want to join, I don't know, let's say the Rifles Regiment or any other regiment, I can go to a training unit and I could have one instructor from, could be the Paras, one instructor from the Royal Irish Regiment, one instructor. You have a mix, and I think that shouldn't be the case, because I think in most cases it kind of waters down the emotional investment that an instructor has in training up a recruit. That recruit could be going to any unit. Whereas if you're training up recruits who you know go to your unit, I think you take a bit more pride in that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if this pilot turd goes to, because what happens is, if when I got the 3 para and you get some idiot come from training, the first thing you ask is who's your instructor?
Yeah.
Because you want to know who trained this, map it up.
Right.
Or you want to go and ask that instructor, what the hell happened here? Like, why is he through? So we are only trained by ourselves, and I think that works well, because we have this sense of pride, real sense of pride and elitism drilled into us. So we put extra effort into training our guys. It wouldn't work so well if you didn't really give it down, or our unit didn't really give it down. And the reality is, and also the instructors. I mentioned the selection process at the end of PE company earlier, at the end of phase 2 earlier. Instructors want all the guys to pass. They want as many of the guys to pass as they can. They don't want it to fail, because it demonstrates how good an instructor they were getting the guys to that point. That doesn't mean they don't want to drop people off. They won't bin people off.
But then you go to para selection and it's inverted, right? And their instructors want to see how many people they can get to drop out.
Yeah. Basically, I started in phase 1. There were 63 of us, and when I finished, when I got to battalion, there was 12 or 14 of us.
Wow.
Who got through all the way. Yeah, who got through all the way, which is a pretty big, like, failure rate, so to speak. But a lot of those, most of those numbers, they dropped off pretty early on in phase 1 and phase 2, because especially phase 2, it was so challenging. It was literally, there was no room for error. The smallest error was hammered, and I get why. But in that particular, training team, violence was always like a go-to for going to fix this problem. And part of the issue I had was, like I said, I was like super nervous. I was always panicking. Like, in my head, I was always panicking, and so I'd make mistakes, tiny things, and I would just get battered for it. Because what it's like, you make one mistake, and if you're not in the right mindset, it just creates another mistake.
Right.
Another mistake. You start overthinking another mistake, and I was in that early on in phase 2. Like, I found out the hard way, really the hard. I hated it initially, but got to the selection and managed to pass it.
Hugh, I'm going to flip it over to Dave here for a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll jump right back into it.
So if you guys sleep hot at night, you know just how disruptive it can be. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all the above. That's where GhostBed can help. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, GhostBed is your go-to for cooling mattresses, cooling pillows, and even cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts with your body temperature, every GhostBed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firmer option with excellent support, your GhostBed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a GhostBed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out your mattress for 101 nights risk-free and make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping, and most items ship within 24 hours. If you're not sure which GhostBed is for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions and get your personalized recommendation. Or reach out to their friendly team of sleep experts for all the help you need. Even better, Team House listeners can get 50% off site-wide for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com/house and use code HOUSE at checkout. Again, that's ghostbed.com/house with the code HOUSE at checkout to save a whopping 50% off site-wide.
And I want to tell you guys about We Defy, my book I have coming out in December, The Lost Chapters of Special Forces History. Tomorrow, I will be at an event in Hackensack, New Jersey, 92 Kennedy Street, Hackensack, New Jersey, sponsored by Triple Lot Design Clothing Company. And I'll be there at 11 a.m. And we're going to be talking about the book and some of the stuff in here. It covers Detachment A, Detachment K, Green Light, Blue Light, the Commanders in Extremis Force, some things that haven't been written about before. So I'm excited about it. And I hope to see at least some of you tomorrow morning.
And for our podcast listeners, that's on the 9th. So by the time you've heard this,
Yeah, that's Saturday the 9th. Yeah.
So don't show up tomorrow when you hear this.
And please check out our Patreon. There's a link down in the description. If you sign up, you get access to all of these episodes ad-free and support the channel. We really appreciate it. You guys keep this whole thing going. So Hugh, back to you.
Yeah, Hugh, real quick, from the numbers that dropped, what percentage, if you can take a guess, were self-select, and then what percentage were like bellowed out by the instructors?
Oh man, you're asking me now. I'd say in the vicinity of 70% was self-select.
Yeah.
Just like mentally, I mean, the phrase would be rang the bell. We don't have that,
Yeah.
but mentally just binned it out, and then the other 30% were gone. A very small amount would have basically gone back to a previous platoon. Hey, a different training platoon, we've gone back a step. We need to redo this. Could be live firing. It could be safe handling a weapon. It could be, something critical. You're going back. Oh, fitness. It's not fitness. Go back, and others would just get binned out. So I'd say about 70% was self-select.
Yeah. I think that's probably true of
All of them, yeah.
all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people go into these processes and decide that it's just not for them midway through or partway through.
Yeah, I think they just have it's a combination of what some people will just be pure ignorance, some people will be overconfidence, some people won't know what they're doing. A lot of people who join up over here is because they've got a lack of options, and it was definitely part of it. What it was with me, I sort of I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I saw a lack of options, and I knew this was something, and it's also for sure they mismanage their own expectations. Don't realize how hard things are going to be, and that has to be more the case these days. Where things are pretty flipping easy.
Yeah.
When you grow up these days.
Yeah.
I mean, they were pretty easy when I was growing up, but relatively speaking, they're a lot easier now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what were, are there any good slang words that the paras would use, like when they were conditioning you against the non-paras? Like what were some of the words that paras called other units?
There's one main one. So we would refer to other units as crap hats. Crap hats. And the reason being is that, so we've got our military, our normal standard dress, and we've got a ceremonial dress.
Yeah.
So for us, the headdress we wear, our beret, that's all we wear. We wear that ceremonial dress, we wear that standard dress. It's like we don't have any option.
Right.
Most other units, with the exception of one I found out recently, most other units, if not all, apart from our tank regiment, they have their beret, but then for the ceremonial dress, they wear these like weird cap things.
Yeah.
I say weird, they're really common, but to me they're weird, and they make them look like a postman somewhat. So you just say the crap. Don't just stay away from the crap hats. And the other one which was less common, would be just non-ferocious. Stay away from the non-ferocious. They're not worthy of your time. Yeah,
That's so
crap
British.
hats has been taken on a little bit by other. We've been taken on by a few crap hats recently, units, and they tend to say it as a bit of slander if they want to insult someone else. A bunch of crap hats, and I think, no, you are too.
Before we move on, let's talk a little bit about what the paras actually are, especially for the Yank audience listening to this that maybe isn't exposed. I mean, the paras are a storied unit, an elite, airborne infantry unit within the British military. I mean, tell us a little bit about the unit and its history, if you can.
Yeah, no worries. So we're relatively young. The British, obviously, we've got an esteemed history of military going back hundreds of years. And so we're pretty young in terms of military history in the British forces. and people do go to great pains to try and point that out as a weakness, but I like to see it as hey, we're modern, we don't have all these crazy traditions holding us back. But we were formed in 1942, and it was actually Churchill who called for it. He sort of Germans had deployed paratroopers in I think 41 or 40 maybe, and the Germans actually had a horrendous casualty rate when they did it. And Churchill thought, hey, that's sounds like a great idea. We need an airborne infantry. That's the reality of what happened. We need airborne infantry. And what they actually did was they basically started training. They got lots of volunteers from different units, and they put together an airborne unit, and became originally known as commandos, and then later on became the Parachute Regiment, and actually went through a couple of iterations early on, but. Yeah, so 1942 when we were formed.
I might be a little off on my history, but I think we may have gotten our Maroon Berets from you guys, actually.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, the Maroon Berets are pretty common across the world
now.
Yeah,
I think it was the exposure to the American forces to the British that came from.
Yeah, well, the maroon actually was, so the maroon color was actually chosen by, are you aware of a general or field marshal we ended up as? Montgomery?
But what? I thought, wasn't it the wife of one of the officers that chose the color?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was Monty's wife. Monty's wife.
Yeah. That's where the American Airborne got their Maroon Berets from. Also, it originated with you guys.
Yeah. Makes sense. So that's where it came from. So it was 42. Yeah. But I mean, originally the intent was, and still now, the main function, the capability of our regiment is shock troops, deploy behind enemy lines quickly and fuck shit up, basically, just cause mayhem and to enable other operations to go on. That's our main wartime role. And it must be the same for your airborne units.
Pretty much.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate flanking maneuver, right? To parachute behind enemy lines and hit them where they don't expect you to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're the only unit over here in the British Army whose sole purpose is, para insertion, basically.
And so they did operations in World War II, I take it.
Lots and lots of operations, lots and lots. I could reel them off if you want. I could reel the battle honours off if you want.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Let's go. This is a para appreciation podcast. Yeah. So,
you want me to do it? Okay, Bruneville, Oudna, Breville, the Rhine crossing, Arnhem, Normandy, Primosol Bridge, Athens, somewhere else I can't remember, and somewhere else I can't remember, and then the Falkland Islands. But the Falklands was 1982.
Do you have any idea offhand? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but do you have any idea how many airborne combat operations they did during the war?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. Hundreds.
Okay.
Hundreds. Okay. Yeah. I couldn't reel off the number. Yeah, but it was hundreds. Guys.
It's interesting that on the American side, the Rangers were not airborne during World War II. That didn't happen until Korea. But the 101st, who are not airborne today, were during World War II, and they jumped into Normandy and did all of that. Yeah.
101st aren't airborne today.
No, they're air mobile. They're in helicopters going from point A to point B. They're not parachuting. No.
Don't they still though have? Do they still have the airborne designator on the?
They might have an airborne tab.
Yeah.
That might still be there.
But they're not airborne.
No.
Yeah, they're air mobile.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. Well, I'm sure. So when did that happen? Because I've just come back from Arnhem. Well, I said just come back 2 months ago. Just come back from Arnhem, which obviously was Operation Market Garden. Are you guys aware of that?
Yeah.
So there's always a lot of Americans out there, and I'm sure I jumped into Arnhem, not in 1944, but I did it in like 2009, I think it was. No, 2009 maybe. And I'm sure I jumped with the 101st. I jumped the Yank airframe.
It's possible that they were a 101st guy that went to airborne school and was qualified. I mean, or somebody who was in the 101st and had their combat patch and then went to an airborne unit. I mean, it's possible. Sure.
Yeah.
Jumping with Americans, by the way, is a different kettle of fish to jumping British.
What's the difference between the two?
Well, we've got some structure and order in how we send the sticks out. Like we'll go out half a second each side, half a second each to stop the air steals. Now, when I jumped with the Americans, with you guys, it seemed to be every man for himself. And what surprised me most was people were really eager to get out the door. It's not the case with us. Like, okay, we'll get up and get out. We're hot and sweaty, but we'll get out when we get out. And some people aren't a fan of jumping because obviously the injury rate's really high.
Yeah.
But when I jumped with the US into Arnhem, they were gagging to get out. I don't know what was going on.
I think part of that, especially like with the 82nd, I think part of that might be just because the sheer number of people they're trying to get off a bird at one time,
and each pass
that they're just these mass passes where it's just raining bodies from the sky. Well, hopefully not raining, but but yeah,
a controlled descent.
Yeah,
semi-controlled
descent.
Yeah.
Because you guys like stealing air and things like that probably aren't major concerns for you guys when you're jumping, right? That it's
spaced
orderly,
out and everything.
That you're spaced out and it's orderly enough.
No, when we jump, we'd always try and jump as close together as you would in an operation. So like half a second.
Okay.
So you when the sim stick's gone out the door, you got, so the people listening who aren't aware, you got blokes jumping out both sides of the airframe. Yeah. Half a second intervals. The chance of an air steal is still pretty high.
Yeah.
So when we're in Arnhem, one of the things I like to do when I go out and watch jumps in Arnhem is I spent 4 hours laying down my back on the drop zone looking up and along with everyone else going, ooh, air steal, ooh.
Yeah.
You don't, the like the controlled easy descents are not the ones you're looking for. You're looking for the ones which and then they land okay, everyone shoot it.
Some things never change.
Yeah.
So you make it through Paris selection. Tell us about being like a young guy, new recruit, showing up in the unit and what that's like.
Oh man, well again, it's like he lulls you into a false sense of security. Things did phase 1 yet, thought great. Into phase 2, that was like carnage, and then finished phase 2, did selection, passed selection, or was selected, I should say, was selected again. And you think, right, it's in. We're in the Paras now, and got the battalion, and it was mad. It was like walking into a meat grinder. You think. You think you've made it, you think there's nothing else you need to prove, and then you walk into the unit and you realise that you're the smallest fish in a lot of people who've been there for a while. All of these people, you all of a sudden realise, I was looking up to these people 9 months ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago. I was looking at these guys and thinking, this is the reason I'm joining. And now you're in there with them and expected to be at the same standard. And it was pretty daunting. I ended up in a room, an 8-man room where I first got put into, really basic. And I had a mate in there, actually, who I had from training. And I'd broken my hand on selection. So I'd been delayed to get into the unit because after you do selection, you do like a live firing exercise, final exercise, and something else. And so I'd been delayed going on to that. So I came a few weeks later. And I got put into a room with him. And we were chatting, literally my first hour in there, we were chatting away, and a guy came into the room who looked pretty young, and I said, all right, mate, or whatever I said to him, called him mate, however he was speaking, I referred to him as mate, and he walked out. And my friend, Ben, who actually went on to British SF, he said, he was looking at me, and he was like a ghost, and he said, what are you doing? I said, what's the... He said, you called him mate. Who is he? He said, he's a corporal. So, he's an idiot. No, you don't.
Like it's the Minister of Defense.
Yeah, but I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting, hey, it's big boys rules. I've passed my driving test kind of thing. I can drive wherever I want. I've done all my training. I can do what I want. I don't have to call corporals corporal. And it wasn't the case. I just called this guy corporal. It turns out he was one of the most respected and formidable corporals in the unit. He also went on to SF as well. And it's sort of, oh shit. I'm in this world again. I'm going to try and learn how to get through it. But it was hard and fast. It was January 2001, I think, when I got to the unit. And it was kind of a weird time because the British forces at the time, our operational tempo was not high. We had a few small things going on every now and again, and a regiment would deploy and do some peacekeeping or something like that. The exception there'd been an operation, a hostage rescue mission into Sierra Leone.
Yeah, Barabas.
What was that? Sorry.
Yeah, we had Phil on talking about it. Phil Campion.
Oh, did you? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was Paras Marines and SAS and SBS when they did that, and so that happened the year before. But apart from that, nothing much had gone on. And when the operation, I don't know what it's like with the US mill, but I imagine it's the same. Like when the operational tempo is low, people get real bored real quickly.
Yeah.
Tension's really poor. Recruitment is pretty poor. And the people, you end up with a big pool of people who are senior, who haven't actually done a lot.
Right.
And you get it's a very different environment, what I know now, to being in when the operational tempo is really high. You end up doing just bullshit tasks, bullshit taskings, bullshit training. It's just very repetitive. You've got commanding officers who have taken over, for example, 3 para for 2 years, who want to make their mark. They want to get their CBE or MB. They want to get their knighthood or their award from Buckingham Palace for amazing service to the country. And how can they do that when there's no operation going on? They invent ways. They're trying to reinvent the wheel. It just becomes very.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a pretty place to be at the time. It was difficult. But then obviously, 2001, like I said, I joined, and then September, everything changed. Literally everything changed. I deployed to Ireland, Northern Ireland, the end of 2001 over Christmas. That was my first operational tour was to Northern Ireland. And again, that was winding down. So it wasn't that interesting. I mean, I don't even remember it being that exciting. I remember a little bit of trepidation going out on my first patrols around the areas we were in, but nothing crazy. There was nothing real kinetic going on.
Yeah.
Attacks and things at the time in Northern Ireland were directed inward to themselves, as into the local populace, if anything was going on, or towards the police. Very little towards British troops, because the Northern Ireland peace deal and all this had been signed, and it was winding down, and British troops were pulling out of there slowly. So that was all a bit of an anticlimax, but 9/11 happened, and the world was changed forever, and path of my life, probably your lives, was changed forever as well.
Tell us about that, about how things changed in your unit deploying, and that first pump over to, I don't know if it was Afghanistan or Iraq first for you, but what that was like. I was actually at home on leave when that all started unfolding, and by that time we'd moved off of the mountain, and we moved down into a little village in the valley floor, right next to a couple of rugby pitches, and I was going out to have a kick about with the ball, and this thing unfolded on TV, and I was sat there 4 hours later, 5 hours later, still with my rugby boots on, my rugby ball. I hadn't gone anywhere. I was just sort of captured by what was going on. I don't think I really understood what was going on at the time. I was only young. I was very naive where military was concerned, and just global global politics was concerned. And when I returned to the unit after leave, like maybe a week or so later, it was just something different in the air. We knew we kind of had an inkling that people were going to start deploying. We didn't know what, we didn't know who, we didn't know where. So it was just all a bit up in the air. And my actual first global war on terror operation, if you like, was well, in fact, it wasn't the global war on terror. It was the Iraq invasion. It was the invasion of Iraq in 2003. That was the first related thing I did. But before that, there'd been deployments into Afghanistan, Kabul. I think Marines went, and 2 para went on that. But my first big op was into the Iraq invasion of Iraq. Tell us about the invasion then. I mean, that's a hell of your first pop. That's pretty hardcore.
I remember getting told about it. And told we were going. And I remember being like elated. I was driving I got a phone call, somebody deploying to Iraq, and I remember being like, did I get a phone call? Or maybe, well, anyway, at the point I was elated about it as in my car driving home. I remember like shouting out loud, "Go to war, yes, go to war." And I think back on that and I think, man, it's pretty naive to be reacting like that. It's like excitement, but the excitement, the happiness was little bit too elevated. But again, kind of off the back of that period of nothing going on, and the prospects of nothing going on ever in your career was becoming pretty obvious. So the chance to go to war was exciting. We started a beat up process, a pre-deployment training very early on, but that was the first sort of example there I saw. It sort of continued for a few years where our capability to train ourselves for these other types of operations. I mean, even normal war type, like the Iraq invasion was, we kind of weren't there. We still had like our training regime and our TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, and everything was geared up for Northern Ireland mainly, and like peacekeeping missions in Kosovo or Bosnia or wherever we were, and that kind of continued on even to Afghanistan, where it just wasn't good enough. So the Iraq training beat up was a lot of conventional platoon company attack type stuff. We did a massive defensive exercise, which was we jumped into a drop zone in Salisbury Plain, which is kind of southern England, west of London, big open area. We dropped in there for a 10-day exercise, pure defensive. Jumped in with a crazy amount of kit, and as you always do. I think we marched in maybe 10 or 15 miles through the night, through into the next day, and then just started digging trenches. Stage 3, as we would call them. So you're the full war style trench, two fire pits. They're not fire pits.
Yeah, fighting positions. Yeah,
fire trench. Yeah, either side, wriggly tin, so tin in the middle, earth over the top, so it can withstand a chemical, biological, anything attack. Yeah. Which took like 2 days. It's one of those. Have you ever done those kind of exercises?
Not full trench lines, just fighting positions, individual
or like in buddy pairs.
Yeah,
Oh God, horrific! The first time I experienced hallucination was sleep deprivation. It was just madness. But you spend all day because you're digging through the day. You spend obviously you got your patrols out, you got sentries out, but most people are just digging, and you spend all day looking for where the engineers are with their digger trucks coming along to help, and you see them coming up the line, helping different trenches, and then by the time they get to your trench, maybe they help dig it out, or maybe you get the guys in, put some explosives in and blow it, and it almost always makes the trench worse, makes more work for you. It just caves it in, like fuck. We did that for a couple of days. It was horrific in terms of sleep deprivation, effort, and a lot of live firing in an area called Brecon, Sennybridge training area, which is it's our main infantry sort of training area in the UK. It's in Wales. Conveniently, it's about half an hour from where I grew up, which is good. And then we headed off to Q8. Again, that was a big unknown. I think we were definitely expecting full scale war fighting for us.
Yeah.
The reality was for that is that most British units didn't have that. We had some real low level contacts, ticks. Some units had a bit more than others. The armor was really the units that had a lot, but we had very little infantry wise, and we were all pretty naive to it as well. I remember, I say naive to it. We were pretty wet behind the ears when it came to any form of combat. Because none of us had done any of it ever.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the point about the kind of people who are in command positions, almost everyone in command positions in that unit, 3-para, had done no form of combat whatsoever. Right. They'd never been shot at, never shot at anyone else. There was a handful of people who had served in the Falkland Islands in 1982 when Argentina invaded, and they had literally done the most hardcore fighting, but 20 odd years before, and there was only a few of them, so their impact was very little, and we really looked up to them. But those guys weren't in command positions. They were like quartermasters and things like this, or long engagement officers. So Ellie is what we call a guy or a girl who's gone all the way through the ranks, from private all the way up, and then they basically get invited to stay on, and they get converted into a commission, converted to captain and stay on. And there was a few of those. So apart from them, no one knew anything really in terms of the realities of combat. I remember being sat in the trench, and we were getting I say a shell scrape, wasn't a trench, it was a shell scrape, maybe a couple of feet deep, in the Ramallah oil fields, and we were getting artilleried, and the guy next to me, who's still a good friend now, Tom, and he's a little bit of panic. So what are we going to do if we get hit? Nothing, mate. There's nothing you can do, buddy. We're going to be fucked. We're going to be fucked. He said, "Oh, don't speak like that. Don't tell him. Well, what are you talking about?" This guy, the reality of the situation hit him, and that was kind of an example of sort of the naivety of us.
Right.
Fast forward 3-4 years, and it was a very different experience for everyone. People are very, very different at that point. So Iraq, the Iraq War was a bit of an anticlimax for our unit. Some guys had a good time in terms of they actually got, they popped the cherry, so to speak.
Yeah.
I didn't really, we got artilleried, big deal. We had no close quarter or any my section, my platoon anyway, no form of engagement whatsoever. The nearest we got to that was we went out to ambush the forward observation officer, the Iraqi forward observation officer, who was coming forward on a motorbike, getting his binos out, trying to spot where we were, and he'd bugger off. He'd be just out of range, he'd bugger off, and then the artillery would come in, and so we went out to ambush him. We went out one night. He didn't turn up the next morning. And then another platoon out the next day, and they shot him up and got them, but we didn't get them. That's the closest we got, really. Yeah. A big anticlimax, which was weird because we came back from there, and we were treated as heroes. Like, wow, amazing! He did all this crazy stuff. And it's like, yeah, you don't want to say,
yeah, right.
You know what I mean? When I came back to a house with my parents and everyone else in the house, you go, nothing really.
Yeah, they're handing you a beer and you just nod your head. Yep, that's exactly how it happened.
But then that's a matter of perspective, right? Because even if I said to them, well, this is what we did, they still go, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Just the thought of getting shot at is amazing for them.
How long was your first pump? How long were you guys out there?
That was 4 months, 4.5 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So we ended up. So we did like a couple of months of war, and then we went into the when the peacekeeping or the post-war phase kicked in. We ended up moving to patrol the Iranian border because there was a concern that the Iranians were trying to kickstart an insurgency like immediately, and they were smuggling weapons across the border, which they were.
Right.
So we would go over and patrol the border in vehicles, patrol the border. That was pretty fun because the border area. I don't know if you've been in the border area like in southern Iraq with Iran. It's like flat as a pancake. It's all marsh, and you've got raised roads, dirt tracks. You can see a vehicle 4 or 5 kilometers away. You can see the dust. So if we'd spot people doing a deal on the side of the road, mainly, and we go hair-ass chasing after them, they'd see us coming. See us coming. But it still wouldn't stop us going as quick as it could to catch us. It's a bit of fun. We'd get there, and they'd chuck all the weapons, and they'd chuck all the cash. There'd be wads of cash. They'd chuck all the cash, and we'd bring that back in. Sometimes we'd catch people and bring them in for questioning. But it was pretty timid. Pretty timid. It was definitely not what I was expecting. Yeah. What I was expecting in reality is what we got in 2006 on the first Afghan tour. Mm-hmm. But that's not what happened.
Tell us about that then, about the next trip over to Afghanistan.
I actually went back to Iraq, actually. So 2003, I went back to Iraq in 2005, which was a little bit different. They'd switched to that. By that point, IEDs were front and center of the modus operandi of whoever was deciding to attack us. So it's very different, but again, not a huge amount went on. And then in 2000, not for myself anyway. And then in 2006, when we went to Afghanistan, so that was known as Operation Herrick, Operation Herrick 4. Actually, there'd been 3 operations before, but the 3 before basically establishing our base, which was Camp Bastion, it was called. Herrick 4 was the first time that combat troops had been sent in, and that was 3 para battle group. So it was our battalion for 3 para, of which probably 500, 600 paras, with a few admin added on to that, and then a battle group. The rest of the battle group was to support us. It was like 2,000 strong. So logistics engineers, all the usual. That would come along, medics and specialist signals, comms guys, and all that. That was also pretty much an unknown going in. I remember there was an interview with a politician at the time. I forget his name, and he'd said that he hopes that the operation would go without a shot being fired, is what he said. And the mission was to go in and basically go and take control of, not take control, but have a presence in key areas in Helmand province. So to basically lay the ground for reconstruction, provincial reconstruction where it was needed, and to stabilize like local government and minimize Taliban influence in those areas. So he said not a shot being fired, and then 6 months later we'd done over a million rounds, I think, had been fired. Wow. He got it way wrong. He got it way wrong. Yeah, we went. I mean, that was our beat up training for that was in Oman. Now, by that point, I said Iraq had been, the 2 tours there had been pretty much an anticlimax, but didn't take away from the fact that we were used to deploying deploying operations is like different mindset switches, the different expectations you should have. Don't have any expectations. Anything can get thrown at you, from the type of accommodation you're going to be in to how often you see that accommodation, to how much water you're going to be getting, to the weapons systems you're going to be using. And that was no different with Afghanistan. But the difference was in that there was a definite difference in the beat-up training, and that is because I think the history of Afghanistan is so different. Like, the Brits have been beaten up pretty badly in Afghanistan before. Russia got smashed pretty recently, relatively speaking, at that point in Afghanistan before. It's not a place to be trifled with.
Yeah.
And there is a great book called The Bear Went Over the Mountain.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I read.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interviews with Russian commanders from the 70s and 80s, and they're trying to understand basically after action reviews, but a whole book of it, and where they went wrong, why the Mujahideen were to just do them over, and in summary, because the Mujahideen, the people of Afghanistan mainly, who were part of the Mujahideen, and now the Taliban, they're pretty savvy. Like, they know how to fight the enemy, how to fight the foreigners. And we knew that, so the beat up training going in was very different. The last thing we did was we spent 3 weeks in Oman, and by that point I was with the sniper platoon. So I'd gone to the sniper platoon in 2004, and so within 3 paras, only the way it works with our snipers is you can get badged, so you can be invited to go and attempt the sniper course and selection. In fact, it's not selection for the unit, but the sniper course. When you come back to the unit, you may get invited to go into the sniper platoon. And the way the snipers work is we'll very rarely operate as a platoon, but we will go and put 1 or 2 snipers to different subunits, different teams, different sections, different companies to support whatever they're doing. So in Oman, that was very much where we focused our training. It was on shooting in those kind of conditions, and we'd also been graced with quad bikes, like ATVs. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to work out how best to use it. We hadn't asked for those; it's kind of just been chucked at us. Like you get the big operation start off, lots of money gets thrown in, and often you get a lot of kit. You think, what are we going to do with this? We got given a bunch of quad bikes, so did a lot of training with those, and then deployed out to Afghan. Definitely a different feeling going out there than it was to Iraq the first time we went to Iraq for the war. It just seemed more serious. Everyone just seemed very serious. It was like we knew shit was going to go down, but you didn't quite know why. And again, I think it's just down to the history of that place.
I mean, you said you were in Helmand?
Yeah. The
Yeah.
first tour when I was in Helmand. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the most contentious parts of the entire country.
It was, yeah. I mean, at the time, we weren't clear on just how active the Taliban were there and how many there were, and how and what their appetite was for having a scrap. And I think the first 4 or 5 weeks when we were deployed, nothing happened. No, I remember being in a place called Goresh, a little town called Goresh, because we knew there was a Taliban influence there. We went in, we were linked in with the local leader. We were actually based at the US base there. There was a US base, and in that US, I can't remember the US unit that was there. The US were there. There was also a unit of our Special Boat Service, so SBS, one of our Special Forces units, and then a company of paras went in there, myself included. We went and did a bit of patrolling around the town, but the people were like, they didn't have a clue why we were there. They didn't understand what was going on. There hadn't just been a war where we were going in to rescue them from some invading enemy. We weren't there one day, and then the next day we were. From their perspective, I remember getting asked by I remember the Turk getting asked if we were Russians by a lady in the town. We weren't greeted positively. We weren't greeted negatively. And for the first 4 or 5 weeks, that was kind of what it was, just bedding in, getting a feel for things. And then after that, I think once the Taliban got a handle on us and kind of where we looked like we were going to be settling into, then they kicked off. And yeah, I remember the first, again, up to that point, it's 2006 now. We've done Iraq invasion, then Iraq again. 2 para had been out to Macedonia, 1 para Sierra Leone. All these things had happened. So many pockets of little things going on. But even up to that point, the thought of having a firefight, a contact, was like, wow. If you knew someone that had been in a contact, it was like, wow, that guy got shot at and he shot back. Like it was literally like there was like a mythical beast. These people, because it was so rare at that point.
Yeah.
And then I remember the first contact happened. It was a big battle that happened in an area called Nauzad, and I can't remember. I wasn't on that op or that mission, but I remember the guys come back in. It was a company op, and our snipers came back in off that, and they were just so happy. I mean, they were just sweat and dust, and they looked fucked. They looked like wrecked, like they just done 100-miler. And the reality was they just tasted their first experience of an hours long battle in 40-50 degree heat in Afghanistan, fighting an enemy that know exactly where all the rabbit runs are, know how to hide, and they don't wear uniform. They look just like the locals.
Yeah,
and they know all the tricks in the book, and that was the first one. And then after that, it just carried on. They started hitting everywhere. The Taliban started hitting everywhere. Obviously, the most famous one is, or one of the most famous, is the Sangin Valley, Sangin district, where we eventually left years later, and the US Marines came in. Maybe 2008, I think that was, or 2010. Marines came in. So you guys have been there as well, but it was the tempo of contacts with the enemy was like nothing I ever expected. No one expected. It was just it was crazy. It was crazy.
What was your unit's mission there? You talk about these contacts. Like, what was it you guys were trying to accomplish versus, what the Taliban's trying to stop you from doing?
We were trying to. One of the things I've realized over the last couple of years of doing my own interviews. I mean, you'll know, you guys think through things and you process things from ages ago based on what someone else said. And I think we should be able to remember these missions verbatim. And the reality is I don't.
Right.
That's a bit odd. But in summary, it was to gain and hold ground and minimize influence in these key areas, so that we could bolster the key leaders, the local leaders, basically bolster local governance. And in areas where we wanted to do some reconstruction or improve education, improve civil services and all that, then we could do that down the line. That was our mission anyway. So we ended up going into think we had five or six locations: Sangin, Gereshk, Nowzat, Lashkar, a bunch of different places, and we bit off a bit more than we could chew. Really, we spread too thin. I think. Well, we know we spread too thin, because what ended up happening was, instead of being able to get into a position, get into a compound, most of the time you would take over like civil buildings, like the civil centre. I said take over. We'd go in there with the police's blessing, local leaders' blessing, go in there, and the aim would be to saturate the areas. But when the Taliban started attacking back, we didn't have the troops to saturate the area because we'd already taken on too many places.
Mm-hmm.
We had too few troops dotted around to do any kind of saturation. It just became pure fighting, just to survive, basically survive and keep a handle on these areas. Very limited to get any supplies in or out. I ended up for 2 months in a place called Musa, and it's known as the Siege of Musa. There's been a few things written and produced about it, documentaries. And for 2 months, you couldn't get in and you couldn't get out. And we were down to our last rounds of ammunition. We were down to our last supplies of food. And by the time I got out of that place, the rest of 3 para was already back in the UK. Because the RAF wouldn't fly in, because if they tried to fly in, they get an airframe shot down. It was just complete lockdown in that position. That was kind of the worst of it. It was kind of the most famous example of that. It was life changing, like genuinely life changing. That Musa example. I mean, we get hit 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. And sometimes it would be 5 or 10 minutes, a 5 or 10 minute contact, battle. Other times it'd be hour plus, every day, all day, every day. And it was the same in Sangin. In Sangin DC, they're quite lucky there, where they had the ability to get out the gate. There was a bit of not dead ground. There was a buffer zone of open area between the compound walls, so to speak, and the green zone. Now, when I say the green zone, I don't mean like a rat green zone. I mean green zone as in green area,
right,
where enemy can hide. Because obviously the green zone is known by a lot of people who like serve in Iraq as safe area. Green zone in Afghanistan to us means a totally different thing. It means like foliage. It means river, foliage, ditches and irrigation. And in Sangin they can get out, so they can go out and patrol, and go out and do fighting patrols and things, but they would experience the same thing. Like every time they go out, they get smashed. They probably get smashed on the way out. They get smashed on the way back in. They get smashed from the compound. And the casualty rate for that tour across the battle group was like 1 in 10. I think it was like 10%. It was pretty high. In a 10-day period, in the first 10 days I was in Musa, we took 55 casualties in that 10 days. Now, a big proportion of and there was only 88 of us, but we also had Afghan forces in there. There were maybe 20 or 30 of those. So between them and us 88, it was like 50 odd casualties, 3 dead in 10 days. It was just carnage.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty heavy. But there was nothing. The Taliban had locked down in that compound. They could literally get to the walls. Like if you were doing like a bit of war training, a bit of war gaming, and you had a map of the town of Musa, and you were asked to, hey, pick the spot on there which would be most difficult to defend. You'd pick the district centre because it's like impossible to defend, and that's exactly where we were.
Yeah,
and we hadn't chosen it. So some months before. The Afghans have been in there, and one of our Pathfinder platoon unit, which is one of our elite reconnaissance units called Pathfinders. They were basically driving past, for want of a better expression, in the desert, on the high ground, looking into Musa, just doing some reconnaissance. And at the time, there's a contact going on. The Afghan police were getting hammered by the Taliban, and they went in to support. They went into support, got in there into the compound, and then couldn't get out because of the lay of the land. You know, you could walk. A Taliban fighter could walk to the wall and not be seen. You know, and you could have a sentry up here, high up, and not be seen because it was just the center of a very dense built up area. They got in, and then they struggled to get out, and we put a battle group up in. So the whole battle group did an operation just to create a safe path through the town, so we could take the Pathfinders out and replace them with a Danish unit, which we did as on that op. And that was just crazy as well. Taliban did not want us to get in there. We put the Danish in, then the Danish got stuck, and they took a lot of casualties. And they also had a sniper threat at the time. There was a Taliban sniper who was being pretty effective, taking people out, headshots within the compound. I
was
got
that
tasked
was that
myself.
Danish unit? Was that Armadillo, or am I thinking of a different one?
Ooh, it rings a bell. I'd have to check on that though.
They did a documentary about it. It was a Danish infantry platoon.
Did they? Maybe it was. I'll have to check on that. But yeah, I got tasked with going in with a friend of mine who was my sniper buddy. We were my pair. I going in with a section which is eight with 8 infantry guys, so paras, 8 other paras, and a major and a sergeant major. And we were going to go in because by this point there was a platoon of Royal Irish Regiment in there. And the Royal Irish Regiment were part of our battle group. They were supporting us like additional numbers, and they were stuck in there. So we were going into basically battlefield casualty replacements, and they had no sniper capability either. So we went in there. The Danish ripped out. We went in, and it was a helicopter, Dusk, one of the last helicopters that came in, dropped us off. And I remember it was nighttime. Got shown this little room we were sitting in. We were going to be sleeping in. Myself and Jared is my oppo, his name. We were sat next to the ops room, and just a cacophony of noise just outside kicked off. Knew it was a contact, but it was loud. It seemed like it was coming from everywhere. And you know, when you're in a building, inside a room, and you hear a contact going out, it sounds like it's everywhere anyway because of the acoustics. And we grabbed the weapons, we went running outside. We didn't have a clue of the layout of the compound, didn't know anything. We literally just landed and went bolting outside. And it was literally all 4 sides of the place was just erupting. Everyone was getting the Taliban were bumping all 4 sides, and it was a complex attack. It was multiple flanks, multiple weapon systems. You had small arms, you had rockets, you had Chinese rockets, and RPGs going down. And so we just grabbed the first bit of high ground we could, and just started shooting at what we could. And it was wild. You had the British in there, who we were pretty squared away, as in professional soldiers, right? Paras,
Yeah.
And but you also had the Afghan forces in there who were, they may think they were professional, but they were like crazy. There was one guy who we learned this. You could easily spot him. This policeman, you could easily spot him in a contact at night, because whichever the Sanger he was in was the one with all the sparks were flying from, because the AK-47 he had a bent barrel. So you would fire it anyway. There was sparks flying out everywhere. But, honestly, yeah. I mean, why not? You couldn't get a replacement in there. So.
Yeah.
But that first night was just batshit, and that's how it went on for the entire thing, like a proper baptism of fire. And the thing is with that is I'd been in loads of stuff up to that point in that tour. That was like, I went into Musa in August. I'd landed in Afghan in March. So I was pretty seasoned by that point in terms of, facing the enemy, and that was just took it up a whole other level. And it's also a different ball game when you were really restricted in what you could do tactically. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the manpower to even get out the gate, because if we tried to get out the gate, we'd only have maybe a section or so to get out, unless we took everyone from the compounds out, and that means we'd be giving the compounds up to the Taliban. We weren't. That wasn't our mission. We had to hold it. We couldn't go out the gate. It was literally just defend. That's all we could do. And because they could get to the walls, you one day you'd be getting a small arms attack from a couple of flanks. Another day you'd be getting grenades thrown over the wall from the mosque, which was just a pile of rubble by this point. It was pretty frantic. It wasn't a nice position to be in.
Yeah.
It's different dealing with stuff like that when you've got lots of tactics, options at your disposal. When you are pretty much at the behest of what the enemy wants to do that day.
Right.
It is push you in a different mindset, completely different mindset. And also, we didn't know when we were leaving. There was no indication of when we were leaving whatsoever. And I don't know if you know anything about that siege, but what ended up happening was a combination of negotiations with our officer in command there, a guy called Adam Jowett, Major Adam Jowett at the time. He was discussing with a local leader who started coming in on behalf of the Taliban to try and sort of bring an end to the carnage, because the town was just getting trashed. There was no civilians there at this point. It was just Taliban. Apart from there was one civilian guy, and he was an old dude, mad as a box of frogs, walking stick, blind as a bat, and he was living outside the town, must have lived inside of the town at some point, but every day he would walk in, feeling his way up a wall, regardless of what was going on, what firefights, what anything was going on. He'd feel his way up the wall, he'd get to his little shop, do whatever he needed to do in the shop. He wasn't selling to anyone because there was no one to buy anything. Doing whatever he was doing in the shop, maybe getting supplies or whatever, and then he would manhandle himself back out, blind as a bat, every day, and he was the only civilian that would come in. And what happened is Adam and then outside of that, so back in Bastion, there was more senior conversations going on with senior Taliban and senior parts of the British military to negotiate a ceasefire. And a ceasefire happened, and the Taliban organised local transport for us. So local jingly trucks, cattle trucks, Afghan cattle trucks, complete with Afghan drivers. And one morning, a bunch of trucks turned up, dawn, and just before dawn, and we jumped onto those trucks, and the Taliban extracted us into the desert where a bunch of Chinooks were waiting for us. Which is nice of them. It's just so surreal.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't think anything, but to you the stories of the enemy allowed us to leave and saved us. They sort of kind of got us out. It's like Second World War stuff or Korea or somewhere else. It's not 2006 Afghanistan, like 21st century.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And when we came back, in, we were told. So when we finally got to Camp Bastion, we were brought together and told, this didn't happen. You won't talk about this. Yeah, and we didn't. Even a lot of guys in 3-Para didn't know about it until much later.
Yeah.
And the first I saw that it sort of become public was on Wikipedia in 2009.
Wow.
So it was that was Qala.
Yeah. I had never heard of any of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's to me it lends to the frustration of a lot of GWAT veterans in terms of especially Afghanistan. I mean, it happened in Iraq, but especially in Afghanistan, they put a few guys out on these tiny little cops or these little positions that couldn't really be held, and really what these positions did. What they did is they served to draw the enemy to them. It's always like we need to deny the enemy this area, but you're not with
you're not
with 20
denying
guys. You're not denying anything to anybody, and they would leave, Allied troops in these positions, these untenable positions, and leadership didn't do anything with that.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I agree, and I think the cause of it in 2006 was we just underestimated how much effort the Taliban would put in and how annoyed they would be at us being there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd like to ask Tootle. So the colonel of 3-Para is a guy called Stuart Tootle, and he's quite well known over here as a military expert, a tactician, very well respected by us. He led as well. He was the perfect CO at the time, and but I'd like to ask him, why did we go into all those positions? I can't imagine it was his decision. I'd like to think it wasn't his decision.
Yeah.
I think you would like to think it was higher up, but I think if we consolidated, to your point now, Dave, if we consolidated on a few, like half the number of positions,
Yeah.
That's 6 months. But then I don't know. It could have been time pressure. Could have been just get out there, do as much as we can, as quick as we can, and we'll deal with it. And it just didn't go like that, because that really set the tempo for the rest of the operation.
Well,
because
it also sounds like the expectations when you guys first went in there was that this wasn't going to be what it became, right? That you weren't going to have
correct.
that level of resistance.
And the thing is that the other interesting thing is that people didn't believe us when we came back, when we described what it was like, which was really frustrating.
Yeah.
So they didn't believe.
Because the story at the time was that the war's going well, and you're telling something different?
No, it was because we'd gone from a military which very little experience or chance of having a contact with the enemy to all of a sudden you've got this unit coming back and going, hey guys, you need to get serious in your training, like get your medics trained up. It's not child's play anymore. Because one of the things that happens in those low operational tempos as well is you kind of pay lip service to the training you're doing or the training you're giving, especially on the medical front. You do the basics, you do what you're supposed to do, but there's no emotional investment in it. And all the lessons you learn from the previous carnage operation mission, war, Falklands in our case, or Gulf One, they're not carried forward when the operations aren't, tempo isn't high.
Right.
So we had come back and thought, shit, we need to up our game with medical training, for example, first aid training. We up our game with other things, basic things, and we were trying to. So when we came back, we got asked. Some of us got asked to go and be part of the pre-deployment training for what would be the third unit going out there, because obviously we left, the unit had already come in, which was the Marines or battle group. We got asked to go and advise on these things, and I went on. So I did 2 stints on that, 2 different places. I went and trained and was part of training for a company, an infantry company from a different unit, a different regiment, and I also went down to a sniper training unit elsewhere. The sniper training unit, they wouldn't believe what the weapon system was capable of. We were using an L1A3, which was 338, like AI thing. We were telling them it's capable of much more what the pamphlet tells you. By the way, like you can go further distances. It's fine. But the company, infantry company, was much more frustrating. We were literally told by the permanent staff who were doing the instruction, like, don't scare them, don't, because the other thing is, these are different kinds of units. There's an advantage to having a selection process. Right. Anyone that argues differently is talking absolute nonsense, and they do argue differently. The units who don't have a selection process don't want to believe that having a selection process is better. The reality is that having a selection process means you end up with, on average, more resilient, more capable people than a unit that doesn't. Obviously, there's exceptions to that rule.
And here comes Hugh straight out of Afghanistan with a wild look in his eyes. And there was definitely a worry that people go out there with the wrong attitude. You don't want to be going out onto a mission like that and being worried about losing your life. You want to be going out on a mission like that and thinking, I am as capable as I can be. I know exactly what needs to be done. There's no more training I could do to prepare me for this. I trust the people around me, and I trust the unit I'm part of. So you went in and we were softly build their confidence.
Yeah, exactly. We were softly, and it was over a couple of weeks. This particular part we were on with them, and it was coming towards the end of their beta training. And they were just doing really basic things wrong. Like the officers there'd be a battle going on, and this is training. Be a battle going on, and the officers they'd want to consult the map, and they'd get behind like a Land Rover, a soft-skinned vehicle, to consult the map, because for 20 years. They could do that in training and hide behind a soft-skinned vehicle as if that's going to stop a round. They look at the map, and we come over and go, guys, you can't. If you do this out there, you're literally you're dead. It's not going to stop. stop it. And went on, and no one was listening. And it got to the last day, and stood up, and with a British expression is ripped a new arsehole into them, and just told them, you guys need to start switching on. You're not paying any attention. You're not listening to what we're saying. Part of the problem was as well is that the paras in the UK, we're not that popular amongst other units, like for a bunch of different reasons, right? And it's unfounded reasons mainly.
An
like,
airborne unit being cocky? I don't believe that.
Like we're pretty arrogant. Like we can be pretty arrogant. Like I said, we've got these names for the unit, not
Right.
Rush. We don't get on well, and there was definitely a part of it in people not believing us, and that they thought we were sort of inflating it. Oh, let's build it up. Like, yeah, we're the greatest. We need to make these stories up. Say, no, this is really what happened. You were really going to go out there, and as soon as you go on the ground, you're going to get shot at. And if your drills and skills aren't good enough, as a team, as a unit, or as an individual, you're probably going to get injured or get someone injured or killed. It's going to happen. It took a couple of tours for everyone to realize, hey, it is actually like they said it was. It is that crazy.
This is interesting because, you're going from, being that sort of like cocky young paratrooper to growing into being a professional soldier and like passing these skills on to the younger guys that need this stuff when they get overseas, which I think is like a very interesting progression to make.
Yeah, I think, I found that actually quite, the command side of it, I was finding a little bit difficult, not in terms of tactics on the operations, so to speak. I was not bad, like modesty kicking in. I wasn't bad, on the ground. I was not bad at all. But the reality for me in terms of career, my career progression, promotion had been like rapid, crazy rapid. You normally to become a section commander, running a team of 8, you're looking at 8 years, maybe average of about 8 years to get to that position at that point. I did it within 3 or 4. And I say I did it, wasn't aiming for it. I just ended up as running my own team at that point, and then I became a sergeant within 8. And a sergeant's normally like 11, 12 years, and it was too quick. I'd cut my teeth in terms of combat, if you like, but I still was dealing with that sort of that confidence issue, believe it or not, in terms of handling guys, commanding guys, and it was all to do with like a status thing, social status thing. One of the things that happens, I don't know if it happens your side of the pond, but when I first joined 3 Para, if you got promoted, then you would move subunits. So if you got promoted, you'd move platoons. You go from this platoon to that platoon. But you're supposed to go from company to company. So you go from a company strength for us is like 140. You'd move companies. And the reason being is you're not all of a sudden being put into a leadership position within your peer group. Because your peer group's still your peer group. They're still your friends. They're still your muckers.
They will do that in Ranger Regiment, for instance. That's more when you get to the platoon sergeant level. A lot of the squad leaders are kind of homegrown in the element, but when you get to the command has some concerns when like all 3 or 4 of the platoon sergeants in the company are boys that like grew up together. That you're creating a little mafia.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how the old kill squads come together.
So at that point guys get moved around a little bit.
Yeah. So So when I got my first promotion, I ended up staying in the same. They didn't move me. I can't remember why. It was just a nightmare. My social circle was a group of people who were just like alphas, and I was not an alpha at that point. I wasn't who is at any point, really. And I found it really hard. But 06 changed it. I think thinking about it, 06 changed it. I got a real belief in myself there. You can say there's not much else can give you a bigger confidence boost as going out, doing something tasty, even if one-off. For the people out there who've only ever done one bit of combat they've been in, but they've been in, they've done it, they survived, they did well with their team, they're respected, they got through it, achieved the mission. That is literally can be life changing. That '06 tour is basically what turned me to who I am now. This outgoing, confident guy. I was totally different before, and I managed over time to pull that into and help me with the command element, just confidence in command. I wasn't. It was not that I was a weak commander, but it was almost like imposter syndrome. It's just like so quick. I just gone through the ranks so quick. I was sitting around. I was the equivalent rank to people I was again looking up to when I was in training. In some cases, I was the same rank as people who would take me through training. In some cases, it's like fucking hell.
What was the next step for you? I mean, now it sounds like you're section commander. Sounds like our version of a squad leader. What was the next jump for you? I mean, I think you did one more trip over to Afghanistan, right?
I did two more.
I
did two more.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to snipers in '04. '06 I was a full screw, what we call a corporal, so yeah, section commander, squad leader. But within the snipers, so I was sniper team commander. And then '08 was the next time I went to Afghanistan. Now, 2007, that year between, was a combination of guest instructing on our sniper course down again in southern England near London, and advising on pre-deployment stuff for other people. And then 2008, the start of that year was a leadership course for me, which was doing my course for qualify myself to get promoted to sergeant. So that would be from a sniper's perspective, that would qualify me to lead the platoon, be the sniper platoon commander, basically. I did that in that early in the year, and then deployed out to Afghan. Now the second Afghan tour for me was very much different to the first. It was quite good. The whole of three, it was quite good. The whole of three para, we deployed out to Kandahar at that point. And that was a bit of a culture shock. That's the first time I'd ever been on a camp with USA, Canadians, just like one of these huge camps, like Canadians hockey. You guys must have been there.
Oh yeah, the boardwalk with the Tim Hortons and
the boardwalk. I just come off. My first experience of Afghan was '06.
Right.
Camp Bath. You know what the Brits are like? We're pretty tight with our money. Like we're pretty frugal. There's nothing. There's none of this coffee shop nonsense. Right. And you got a camp bar, and it's literally like stepping into a what do you call it? What do you guys call it? A mall.
A mall, yeah.
It's like a Cinnabon and everything.
Yeah.
Crazy. So we went there, but the ops we were doing we were doing strike ops. So strike ops for high value targets in southern Afghanistan mainly. So we would spend 2 or 3 days in camp. What was the name of the camp? Not Camp Suta. I can't remember what it was called. In camp, then a mission would come up, and either a company of us would go out on the mission. And the mission could be, or the whole unit, but it's rare the whole unit. The mission could be like a day, out snatch and grab, like out on the helis, drop into just outside the village, run in, grab the target, getting out. And it was always capture, mainly capture, and capture or kill was quite rare. But then we'd be in, get them and get out. And or sometimes the mission would be 2 or 3 weeks. It would go and be to support a US unit like a Bagram area, or a British unit elsewhere, or to put a feint in for an SF attack going in somewhere. So we did that for the 6 months there, and that was really, really good. We had guys doing work with the CIA on a couple of missions down near the Pakistan border. I think just interesting, varied missions, which I really enjoyed. Gives you a different inkling. I mean, had some really good results as well. And we also got to do some of the tasty stuff we did on the '06 tour. We go in, and like I said, we go in and bolster. So 2 para were out there at that time in Helmand, doing the kind of the equivalent tour we'd done in '06. And they were having some real tasty places. And we went into a couple of their spots and bolstered them, and basically got to give them a bit of a rest and go in and go into some areas they weren't able to reach purely because of resources and the state of their troops. Basically, we were fresher, and had some great results in there. That was the first time actually I came across a Taliban fighter wearing uniform. As in, it wasn't police uniform; it was his own, his own uniform. But
It sounds like this is kind of like a deployment where you're really moving on to sort of like, oh, what's the term I want to use? But more like special operations than infantry.
yeah, definitely, yeah, and that's yeah, definitely, and that was quite quite rare at that point for us, for the regiment anyway. One para were doing one para, I think, were already in the Special Forces Support Group role, so they were doing sort of stuff with SF and our guys. So our guys rotate between. We got three battalions, main battalions, one para, two para, and three para, and so you change between the battalions. So we had guys who go off to one para, part of Special Forces Support Group, then come back, and it's just that's to make sure you don't have skill fade in any particular area, because you got a Special Forces Support Group, one para, and you do very little conventional stuff. You do a lot of SF oriented stuff, training wise and mission wise, and so we would chop and change between to make sure the skills aren't lost, and you share knowledge between the units as well. So that was quite unheard of for us at that point. But it was good. It was refreshing to have such specific, defined,
Right.
team-bound missions.
Yeah.
Not like, are you here for 6 months?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
um,
It also must have felt good to go on the offense after your last tour.
oh yeah, oh definitely. Oh yeah. Good point. Yeah, it did for sure. And it was also a variety of offensive ops we were doing. Sometimes we go out with vehicles and be laid up in the desert in a Liga for a couple of days, and then go patrolling into the green zone and put a bump in. Other times, we'd be dropped off on a heli, K's away, and then going on foot, put an ambush in, and then bug out. It was good to be on the offensive side for sure. And like I said, we had a lot of great results. Like tangible results. You get feed. One of the advantages of doing missions like that is because intelligence is so much more. You're sort of closer to the source of intelligence, right? You're closer to the agencies that are really on top of where the intelligence has come from and what it can mean. And so we'd often get feedback. So if we captured or killed someone, brought them in, we'd often get feedback a couple of weeks later, like, hey, that guy you brought in or that guy you shot. He was actually such and such commander, actually such and such, and I'm like, fucking awesome. You don't get that in normal operations. You just because you very rarely return in a dead guy,
right,
to the agencies. Especially like in Musa Qala or in Sangin, you haven't got time or the inclination to do it. The dead guy's staying out there, and his friends are gonna sweep him up.
You're not leaving the wire to recover the body, and even if you did,
exactly.
nobody's gonna come collect it. Yeah.
No, exactly. And most of them wouldn't have any actionable intelligence on them anyway.
Right.
Is the reality.
Then what was the third pump to Afghanistan?
Very similar to the first in terms of, occupying platoon houses, occupying forward operating bases. And again, it was in Helmand, but obviously with so many more troops. I think at that point we had 10,000 in country. I think you guys had something like 40,000, maybe more. I think so smaller areas. We had more troops in smaller areas, but so that was 2010, 2011 through Christmas that was. But because the public sentiment towards what we were doing out there had started to shift slightly. Like the public's appetite over here for accepting casualties and deaths on a daily basis was really starting to die down, starting to dwindle. A bit like the support for Ukraine is at the minute. It's like it's on the dying down. So it makes it really hard to. The appetite for risk becomes less, and that tour was. He was much less conventional and much less sort of small arms attacks from the Taliban. What the Taliban realized early on in 2006 and 2007, so from the first instance of British troops getting out there, is like, hey, we may not be able to combat them like this. We're not doing very well. We're getting slaughtered. So they started switching their tactics over to IEDs, indirect attacks, much like it happened in Iraq and happens elsewhere. And that's what it was like in 2010, 2011. they would tend to initiate contacts with small arms. If they were going to have a prolonged contact with small arms, they'd be quite far away, like minimal risk themselves. But it'd almost always been indirect attack of some sort, be it an IED or something, or multiple IEDs or something else.
Yeah.
And because of that lack of less appetite for risk that the British military had out there, it actually restricted us a lot in terms of what we could do tactically. So there was things like, there was a rule that you weren't allowed to go and put any form of mission in, any form of patrol, any form of any action in, which was less than 12 people. Now, I'm a sniper. Like, 12 people is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
You don't want to do in that, and so that immediately restricts your ability to move super silently, to move without being seen, to move without being heard. Unless you've got 12 ninjas or 12 snipers. No disrespect to people who aren't snipers, but like we're snipers and we train that way for a reason. We're just better at doing that kind of stuff than other people.
Right.
It makes it real problematic, and again, it provides more opportunity to the enemy to attack. And then you couple that with the ramp up in protective equipment that we had to wear. We were really lumbered down with these massive, which is normal now, but these massive, front plate, massive back plate. Our helmets had changed. So on the first, we went out in 2006, we'd be on like Airborne helmets, which were very lightweight. 2010, we couldn't do that. In 2006, the reality was, because of the way the Taliban could move, they're so lightweight, they're dish dashes, right? They've got a few pouches with the mags in their AK-47. They don't need much water because they live there. They're like accustomed to the climate. What we would end up doing a lot of the time on our offensive operations is we need to get dropped in. So we jump off the helis and we would take our armor off and we would cache it. And even then, the armor was really light anyway. It was like a flak jacket, for want of a better word, and then a small chest plate, maybe, I don't know, 8 inches by 4 maybe 9 inches by 4 inches in shape, cover your heart, and one on your back to cover your heart from the rear. We would ditch those and just put them in a pile. And we were going with no body armor. And we'd have our helmets and we'd clip them to our weapon because we could move faster. And to us, the advantage of being able to move fast outweighed the disadvantage of having no armor. You're less likely to get shot if you can move quick. If you can move as quick as the enemy. Fast forward to 2010, 2011, you wouldn't be allowed to take your armor off. It was like, nope, not allowed to do it. No helmet off. And as snipers, the kind of equipment we were issued, you couldn't even get into a decent fire position, or like a prone fire position, because of the armor would raise your chest up. The helmet would hit the back of your arm on the thing and push forward. You couldn't get your helmet to look through the scope. Just a nightmare. Again, I think these are just, I don't know if you guys experience the same thing or your guys experience the same thing. Yep. It's very frustrating. But how do you explain to the mother or father of a dead kid that less armor's better?
Right.
When maybe I went into an inquest after the first tour. When we came back, an inquest to a couple of guys who had died. They'd been a direct hit with a mortar, and they were just peppered, obviously. And the mother was there, and one of the questions she asked of the Ministry of Defence representative is like, why aren't you able to issue body armor that covers the entire body? Like, I know the answer to that.
Right.
You guys know the answer. The answer is obvious to anyone who's rational in thought, but not to the mother of a dead kid.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it really hampered things, which ultimately I think is one of the reasons that our footprint was a lot smaller. You can put loads of troops in an area, footprint is a lot smaller. The Taliban have more confidence. We had loads of I-Star assets up. We had loads of eyes in the ground and things, but you need boots on the ground to have any form of influence. And in reality, on those counterinsurgency operations, as you guys know, one part of it is killing the enemy. The second part of it is winning over the locals.
Yeah.
Demonstrating why we are here.
Right.
You've got to win those over, and you need boots on the ground to do that, and safe boots on the ground. And it was difficult for us to do it. Plus, Afghanistan, the winter is miserable.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah.
So coming back from that tour, talk to us a little bit about where your head is at the time. You're like you said, you moved along quite quickly in the paras. How did you see kind of your future prospects at this time? What was your decision-making process like?
I wanted, so one of the things we have to do, what you're supposed to do before, certainly before you get promoted to corporal, so a squad leader or like a platoon sergeant, is you're supposed to go and do we call it an posting, external posting. Supposed to go and do, basically the common one is go and be an instructor somewhere for 2 years. Just, so it's basically to try and reduce the chance of someone getting promoted up to the ranks because his mate's high up. He's got mates, and this guy is actually useless to get promoted. It's sort of to validate, hey, this guy's being externally audited, if you like.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I didn't have to do that. Because the operational tempo, what I was doing, I didn't go anywhere. Which I'm glad of, because I would have missed the fear of missing out would have been extreme for any of these operations. But I knew I was going to have to do one because they wanted me to, they being the career people in the unit, wanted me to go to Sandhurst as an instructor and instruct young officers, so bringing young officers up. And that's quite a prestigious posting. Like, you go there if you get told to go to Sandhurst if your career projection is high. Like, you're going to go all the way. You're going to be a regimental sergeant major of one of the units, basically. They think that's the case. It's not guaranteed, but you go to Sandhurst to do that. And I didn't want to go to Sandhurst. I wanted to go to Brecon. Brecon, like I mentioned earlier, in Wales, it's our infantry battle school. It's cold. It's miserable. It's horrible. It's where you send soldiers to go to learn how to be tacticians, how to think under pressure, how to perform under pressure physically and mentally in one of the most disgusting places in the UK, in terms of environment and weather and terrain. Mid Wales, glorious country. I wanted to go there because Sandhurst was, you're teaching a lot of drill, you're teaching basically new recruits, although they're going to be officers, how to build their boots, polish their boots and iron the uniform. You're doing all the other stuff, like teaching them tactics and all the rest of it. But I only wanted to teach that stuff.
Yeah.
And I only wanted to teach it to the actual guys, actually, young guys like I was, who were not officers, who were the guys who make everything work, But they didn't want me to do that. So we had a fall. I ended up leaving after the third tour. And I think I'm happy about that. I mean, I wouldn't be here now talking to you guys if I wasn't. But yeah, that's what happened there. I got pretty bitter about it because I'd not put up a fight about anything. I'd done everything that was asked of me up to that point. My operational tempo throughout my career had been high, non-stop. From 2001, that first Northern Ireland tour, all the way through 2011, non-stop. My feet hadn't touched the ground, and I performed well and not grumbled about anything. And then the one thing I asked for, and they said no, and I got very upset, very bitter, very quickly. But the thing is, at that time, is that we knew that 3-Para knew that we weren't going back to Afghanistan. It was the end of it for us because it was all dying off, and the rotations, we weren't on that roster. There was like another 4 or 5 rotations to go, and we weren't going to be on it. So, and there was nothing else on the horizon. So the prospect of staying in and basically being, like one of those old grumpy guys that had been there when I turned up in 2001, we'd done nothing, or bitter because they were in the Falklands and had done nothing since, and were angry about that.
Yeah.
The prospect of being that and being basically a camp soldier, a barrack soldier was not exciting. And the circuit was kicking off at the time. I think, Dave, you mentioned you were a contractor.
Yeah.
So at the time, since 2006 actually, so since 2006 for us, from 3-Para, once people had done what they wanted to do and satisfied themselves with combat in the military, a lot of the guys after that 2006 tour from 3-Para, they left and they went onto the circuit because the circuit in Iraq was booming. Private security was booming since 2001, 2002. 2003, onwards was booming. And there's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah.
So those guys went. And I did the same thing after 2011, out there, earn a lot of money. That was the plan, earn a lot of money and sort of get to do cool things. But just getting paid more.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I think wasn't quite as wasn't. I was looking at it through rose-tinted spectacles.
How did it go in actuality?
Well, you know what private security details are. Yeah, first of all, private security details are like out in the oil fields out in Iraq and other places. It's basically a glorified taxi service for the most part.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, that's what I did. You know, armored vehicles carrying oil workers around different parts of the area. It was a bit surreal because we were working in an area that I'd been in 2003 in trenches, and the trenches were still there. You know, Ramallah Bridge and places like this. So that was a bit weird. And fast forward to, that would have been 2011, late 2011 I started there, and Iraq hadn't changed much for the better since we went in 2003.
Yeah.
Now that's a bit of a common theme in other places, right? Definitely hasn't changed much. But then Iraq's a particular place. It's not, I don't know, it's an odd place. It's almost like they don't want to evolve that much. I think they're quite happy the way it is.
Middle Eastern politics are extremely frustrating, to say the least.
Yeah, true. And frustrate even more in countries like Iraq, where the politics don't seem to pervade outside of the capital city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Baghdad.
Yeah.
And Afghan even more so.
Afghan even more so, right? Nobody cares what's going on in Kabul because it's not their tribe, it's not their village.
No, exactly. And this is. I mean, this is a good point, Dave. This goes back to some of the frustrations we had on the third time we went out there. The third tour went out, I was doing a sort of a dual role of like a intelligence officer role, but on a subunit. So part of a para company, and also in a sniper role there on the offensive operations that we did. And so I got to sit in on a lot of the shuras, the meetings with the key leaders. Mm-hmm. You know, by that point, they were just saying the words that they think we wanted to hear. You know, and we knew that some of them were Taliban. We knew there was all. We knew they were playing both sides, and they knew we knew, and we couldn't do anything about it. And the reality is, they knew we were going to leave. Yeah. They just march in time. They just plodding along until the Taliban come back in. Because they're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? They know the Taliban's going to come in. They know we're there. We know they don't want us to like the Taliban or help the Taliban. We don't want them to help the Taliban, but so they had to be seen to be helping us while not pissing off the Taliban,
right?
Because we're going to be gone. So and back to the point that brought this up is that it doesn't impact their lives that much who is in charge. They still get the 10. This is away from like Kabul, away from Lashkar, Kandahar, in the sticks, the farmers, the rural areas, the Bedouin. Their life's the same, whether it's British uniforms patrolling or the Taliban. You know, their life's the same.
Yeah,
I think for the most part, and probably it's more. Probably they would perceive it as more structured and predictable and understandable under the Taliban, because that's who they've known for longer. They understand Sharia law and all the other things. They know them better than they know us. They play the long game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of it's not frustrating to talk about it like this, because I don't want to make it sound like what was the point of any of it. You know, but it kind of. It puts it into perspective when you see them when you leave like that and ignoring the evacuation. What 4 years ago? It puts into perspective when they move so easily back under the Taliban regime with no issue. They just carry on as normal jogging. It's just like take out the leader, put this leader in, or this structure, governance structure, and it's fine. They don't change anything.
And there's very much a fatalistic tenor or whatever to like a lot of these Islamic countries, where if a strong man is ruling, it's probably because the strong man deserves to rule. Like you don't have these ideas of like individual liberty and things like that. They just don't stand up for it often.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, yeah. So all right. So we go in and we need to improve X country. because their standards of living and what we expect them to be like don't match up with ours. Okay, but how do they match up to their expectations?
Right.
Because by their expectations, they're totally fine.
Right.
No. It's like the tribe in the Amazon who don't have smartphones,
Right.
they don't have bricks, they don't have bicycles. They're not bothered because that's how they live and they're quite happy. They don't know any different.
Yeah.
Even when you introduce something different to them, they don't like it. They want to stay the same. It's kind of the same, and the standards are very different. Same with again Afghanistan, as you pointed out there. What is right and what is wrong is different based on your perspective and when you're understanding and what the culture is built on foundationally, historically. Yeah.
So you did the contractor circuit for a little while, and where are you at today? What are you up to nowadays?
I manage I do HR, which started off as a hobby. The podcast started off as a hobby, but now it's like a second job. Really, a second job doesn't earn for me, but it's one of those I can't step away from because it's just so valuable, for a million different other reasons. But I work for a global satcoms company. I do service delivery for government customers. Satcoms company, which is interesting in itself.
Yeah.
Interesting in itself, and it's also strange because I was never a comms guy when I was in. I kind of can't work out how I ended up in a satcoms company, but I'm here and I'm enjoying it. But so I do that as my day job, but that is very much an enabler for HR, and a few other things I do on the side, which is sort of veteran orientated. But that's what I do. I think like you guys, I try and do an episode a week at least. At least.
How did H-Hour come about? How'd that idea germinate in your mind and come into fruition?
All right. So, in a nutshell, I went through when I left, I wasn't in a great place mentally. I didn't know at the time, and I basically went through a number of years of tough times for various reasons. One of which was like my mental health. And that created all sorts of other problems, work problems, just all sorts of things. My transition from the military into the civilian world was not smooth. It's not smooth for anyone, but mine was over a long time not smooth. It took ages and for a bunch of different things. I learned a lot of stuff along the way, and I got pretty low mentally, like as low as you'd want to get mentally, or as you wouldn't want to get mentally. And I didn't want other people to go through the same thing, basically. But at the time, I'd been listening to a very popular podcast by Mr. Rogan, and like you guys, interviewing. When you're listening to someone interview people from different walks of life and backgrounds and countries and perspectives, then you tend to pick something up from each one, a little bit of information, knowledge, and I think it arms you a little bit. It's sort of great picking up these little tidbits that can help you at an unexpected time in your life. So I basically wanted to communicate what I'd learned. I wanted to avoid my old friends and people I don't know behind me going through the same situations I'd gone through.
Yeah.
Little things like stuff I'd learned about the circuit, stuff I'd learned about mental health, stuff I'd learned about, getting by in the civilian world generally. And so I started the podcast up for that reason. Basically, chat to people, have a conversation with people I'm interested in. And I committed to myself. I started out with I mentioned a guy earlier called Jared. It was my sniper buddy. He did the first 10 episodes with me. And started out with the commitment that if I'm going to interview people and they're going to have these conversations about these subjects, and I need to be an open book. Otherwise, it's pointless doing it. Everything's got to be out there and be honest about my own experiences and what I think about things. And so that's why I did it, to try and communicate useful information to people without sounding like a preacher. If I walked into 3-para, so I started the podcast in 2018. If I walk into 3-para line, 3-para barracks, for example, and said, "Hey guys, have you ever tried meditation?" I get beaten up, I get kicked up back then, beaten up, kicked off camp, never come back. What the fuck is this going on about? Whereas if you bring it up in a conversation in a decent context with someone else who's of a similar background, then it's totally fine. As an example, you know the score. That's why try and get information to people that is useful, basically. But it's gone into something much more than that. He's brought this about. So one of the reasons I know about Team House is from one of your patrons, a guy called Coke, who's a British guy. Yeah, and he's also one of my patrons, and I find that if I hadn't started my podcast, I wouldn't be introduced to you guys and having these conversations with you guys and learning about what you do and your side of the pond. And also, I think there's huge value in spending time talking, actually active listening to talking, because there's so much that even the questions you fired at me today. There's so much that it makes me process, and I'll continue thinking about over the next couple of days about what I think about things and why I think them. Which I think it's an invaluable thing that most people don't get to do these days. How often do we get to sit down and actually talk to someone and listen to someone for an hour, 2 hours at a time? No one does it. No one does it.
My hope is that, for a lot of the guys, a lot of the veterans out there that are able to connect with, a show like H Hour or the Team House, and it sort of gives them a little bit of that connectivity, that they don't feel totally isolated or alone.
Yeah, true. I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of people struggle, ex-military struggle when they leave, is that we incorrectly think that we are the only person going through what we're going through, or one of very few. And the unfortunate reality is that most or many people go through it. Yeah. And especially when guys are concerned, we just useless at talking about feelings and rightly so in a lot of cases. I understand it. But the worst thing in the world when you're military, right, is to be isolated. Like I was talking about Musa earlier. We were isolated. It was fucking horrific. I never want to go through that again. And the reality is that we got the buddy system. We've got mutual support everywhere. There are people within our networks who we know or don't know who have been through the same thing and can offer advice. They're ahead of us on the track. They've been through the shit that you've been through now, and they can help you. But if they don't know about it, they can't. Isolation's not a good thing. And even with the distance, with the best, we'll step up for each other, whether we know each other or not.
I think it's also very valuable to normalize the talk about, the post-traumatic stress, about, the challenges of becoming a civilian again. It's good to normalize that, because I think most of us, when we go through that, we think that we are alone in that struggle, and we wonder what's wrong with us. And so what do? We do what we've been trained to do, which is to tighten up the rucksack, rucksack, put our heads down, and keep trying to put one foot in front of the other. And a lot of times that's not the solution.
No, and it also invites an attitude that, let's say, talk about post-traumatic stress, and the symptoms associated. It also invites an attitude that it's something that is chronic and cannot be improved or cured, which most people think is the case, and it is absolutely not the case.
Right.
There's a few people again through the podcast, a few people I've been very lucky to speak to, and one of them is an American guy. Two American guys actually. One's a guy called Dr. Mark Gordon. I don't know if you've heard of him, but I know he's working with a few of your special forces units over there. And he is basically one of the world leading researcher on neuroendocrinology, so brain hormones, adjusting neuroendocrinology to combat the symptoms of PTSD. So we're right now all of the main focus on reducing the symptoms of PTSD and preventing PTSD is all psychology, and the sort of the physical side of it, the physiological side of it is missed. So what Mark has found is that, so let's talk about reducing the likelihood of developing PTSD. Mm-hmm. So what Mark does with a bunch of SF units in the USA, and I know he's been engaged with a couple of SF units back here, is preemptively supplementing guys and girls, as in literally supplements, which produce certain brain hormones, which are susceptible to getting drastically impacted in blast injuries, not blast injury, but in blast, in repeated trauma, repeated battles, so that layer upon layer. So SF units, SF guys, operators who are doing a lot of work, he administers them these hormones, which are naturally got them in your body anyway. So when they do go into a contact, when they do go into an extreme situation and come out and survive the other side, gets them back in, checks the baseline for the hormones, bumps up again what is deficient, and then it basically drastically reduces the likelihood of developing post-traumatic
That's
stress disorder.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
incredible.
like incredible because it just you got the resiliency you can build in people like that just through training
Yeah.
and rigorous training and physical and mental, and then this additional element, the physiological element, is incredible. And you can do the same with treatment of PTSD. So there's an amazing American documentary film called, I think it's called Quiet Explosions. Mark Gordon features in it. There's a Green Beret features in it. There's a U.S. Navy lady features in it, and an American football player. And all these people exhibit symptoms of PTSD, and they've all basically got traumatic brain injuries. Now the interesting thing is, three of them, so there's four of them, three of them have got traumatic brain injuries from blast or concussion. So obviously the American football player. You've got the Green Beret who's basically getting his head blown out by breaching charges. The Navy lady has got the same symptoms. She got acute PTSD, but she has never been around weapon systems. She's never been in blast, anything like this. The Navy lady was raped. She was raped on a service vessel, but the trauma of the rape produced exactly the same symptoms.
Wow.
Right.
The traumatic brain injuries, everyone else. Now these people have been treated with, again, supplementation, neuroendocrinological supplementation, checking which hormones are deficient, bumping them up, and then seeing which PTSD symptoms remain after that, baseline the physiological side, and then implement the psychological treatment if needs be. So it's because up to this point, it's kind of like this physiological side has been completely ignored. Has been paid attention to. It's madness. So how do you get onto that? Oh, the PTSD. So a point on that is, there is this. I don't know about over there, but here there is a definite some guys and girls who have PTSD, they can sort of fall victim to the victim mentality and kind of be their own barrier to improving. Or they can misunderstand that it's not necessarily a chronic condition. I think that's changing slowly, but it needs to be much quicker.
So you said the doc. I took this notes on my phone. You said that the documentary was called Quiet Explosions.
I think it's Quiet Explosions, yeah.
And the doctor's name is Mark
Gordon.
Gordon. Okay.
Yeah. Mark Gordon. Yeah.
Do we have questions for Hugh?
We do. Hugh stated that he was beat in training. Thank you very much, Soli1234, all-wheel drive to AWD2. Thank you. Hugh stated he was beaten in training, unit life, and approves for discipline. Does this happen in the Rangers, Green Berets? If so, do you approve?
In Ranger indoctrination, there may have been some physical correction issued. That may have happened. It's not common. Like, corporal punishment isn't common. I don't want to give anyone that impression that like it's a normal thing. In special forces, no. I mean, what you'll find is if two guys are really butting heads and they might decide to take it to the wood line, so to speak.
They'll call Thunderdome.
Yeah, but that's a little bit different than a squad leader taking a private wall to wall, slamming him in a wall lockers. That kind of thing. I think that's mostly a thing of the past. Now.
Yeah. When I was in Marine boot camp, it was not unheard of, but this is back in '89. But it was not uncommon for a drill instructor to maybe do a little wall to wall if they felt it was necessary.
Desperate times call for desperate measures.
Since then, I haven't really seen it. You have the hazing or the scuffing up. They'll scuff up the privates in Ranger Battalion, or they did. And this 97. It might be different now, but they would definitely, find fun and sweaty activities for junior enlisted who maybe lost their firing pin or whatever. But yeah. Sully, thank you very much. There are serving female officers in the paras. How much fitter do they have to be than the soldiers? Is fitness for the para officers comparable to SAS officers?
Good question. No, the fitness levels are different. So let's focus on the females a minute. The females are in the paras, so they've only it's quite recently they've got there, but those females would do the same selection, the same physical selection process as their male officer counterparts. But that selection process is slightly different to as enlisted selection processes. There's slight differences, but they do the same as the male, so the fitness is the same. And then officer fitness levels comparable to SAS officer. No, different. I mean, again, I'm generalizing here, but different because the SAS selection fitness levels are so much higher requirement than what they are with the paras. I say physical so much higher. I think the biggest barrier to get into SF over here, Special Forces over here, selection wise, is the likelihood of getting injured. It's almost like you're likely to get injured. You can get to it. You get to a point where you only need to be so fit to pass all the selection tests, but your body needs to be literally strong enough just to not get hammered and develop a stress fracture or roll an ankle or break a bone. But no, they're different. They're not comparable, officer in the paras, and they're not far apart. They're not equal.
Yeah. Sully, thank you very much. What? Oh, sorry. Why is this? Sorry, I have something popping up. Okay. How good were the enemy and the GWAT? Did they have units comparable to UK, US Special Forces and Infantry?
How good were the enemy in what? Sorry.
In the GWAT, in the Global War on Terror, in Iraq and
Oh,
Afghanistan.
sorry, on the GWAT. Oh, okay, GWAT. Oh, how good were the enemy? Relative to what? Depending on where you were, where you were and what time you were serving. I think, where you were and when. You compare one of them to, if you compare an individual, like Taliban fighter, for example, to an individual British soldier, then not comparable at all in terms of professional soldiering skills. There's no comparison. We're heads and tails above them. The reason that they were so challenging to fight is because you were fighting them on their own turf. And again, I alluded to some of the restrictions that we had in this earlier. We were much heavier to move around, they were just more. They were more agile than us. They knew the terrain, and they weren't wearing uniforms. They weren't easily identifiable.
Yeah.
And they also knew they could play the long game, whereas we were playing the short game.
Yeah.
Cunning, very, very, very cunning fighters. That was in Afghanistan anyway.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time we weren't even fighting Afghanis. We killed a couple of people one time, and they were Pakistanis. They were there fighting for the Taliban.
Yeah.
Just different place. Same attention.
And the second part of that, did they have units comparable to the UK, US, SF, and M3? And no, they didn't really have units. They just had a bunch of guys that would come together. Sully, thank you very much. How good were your military leaders? Did you have your versions of Rommel, I guess?
What, when I was serving? Yeah, I think I mentioned a guy called Stuart Tootle earlier, and he's quite famous over here. I say famous, relatively speaking. And there's another guy called Colonel Tim. Oh, I can't remember his surname, so he's relatively famous. Tim gave a famous speech on the eve of the Iraq invasion. Allegedly, it was Bush had it up on his wall, as in your President Bush had it up on his wall in the White House for some time. But Tootle, I think. So Tootle was one of those commanders who, outside of an operation going on, he would strike you as average, just another officer. And in fact, we had another officer at the same time who was pretty much quite disliked, who was junior to Tootle. But you get, when operations and missions like this happen, exceptional things go on. You get, unexpectedly, these like heroes emerge from from the group of whatever, from the organization, and they unexpectedly become the perfect person at the perfect time for the perfect operation, and Tootle was that for that time. And interestingly, with Tootle, his regimental sergeant major, his like right hand man, was also not liked. Tootle was like, but his RSM was not liked at all before that 2006 tour. Not like as in despised. However, the pair of them together on that tour, they were perfect. The personalities were perfect. The way Tootle commanded was perfect. The way the RSM was just perfect for what was going on. Like anyone else, I think it would have been a very different kettle of fish. We would have had more casualties, more deaths.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have achieved what we did, but they were perfect. So Tootle, I'd say on that. Yeah, he was our Rommel.
Sully, thank you very much. Did you guys ever refuse an order during combat or ever hear this? Hugh said he refused to shoot an enemy, and argue with his commander over this.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, so I didn't refuse to shoot an enemy. I would maybe not have done that. So the situation, situation Solly's referring to, is we were on high ground. In Afghanistan. My team was on high ground. We were extracting. We were with another team. Actually, that was a joint mission with a US unit. Actually, we were extracting. We waiting for a helicopter to come in, and I thought I spotted, so maybe 800 meters away, 900 meters away, I thought I spotted what we would call a dicker. I thought I spotted a local or a member of the Taliban giving signals with a mirror, basically signaling where we were or something was going on to the Taliban, other people. I wasn't 100%. I was pretty sure he was signaling. This was a person, a fighting age male, but on the younger side, I'd say maybe 12, 13 years old. And I reported this because I was, there, and I reported it back. I was talking because the team were behind me. I was talking it back, and the commander of the other team that was with, it wasn't a sniper team. The other team that was with us told me to shoot the guy, or shoot the kid, I should say. Well, I said no. He was senior to me, but he wasn't my direct chain of command. And I said, that's the situation Solly's referred to. I said no to that. I wasn't 100%, and could I have killed him and got away with it? Yeah. Is that the right thing to do? No. Would I be sitting here? You were talking about regrets, Dave, at the start of this. I would absolutely, something I'd absolutely regret. So it would have been the wrong decision to do it. Now, question was, did I ever see anyone else doing anything of that? No, I didn't see anyone else doing anything like that. So refusing an order to shoot someone, it's pretty rare to receive an order to shoot someone. Very rare. I've been told it once, and I've given the order once.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it's mostly reactive. Right. See the enemy shooting dead within the rules of engagement. So it's pretty rare. So no, I didn't see that off of anyone else. No.
Thanks. And if you guys hear, our church just started upstairs, so we apologize for any background noise. But dance along with the tune if you know it. Sully, thank you. Was the ROE given to your units always fair? Hugh said units were using surveillance balloons to witch hunt their own during firefights.
Are we always fair? Oh, that's a matter of perspective. I think fair is an interesting word. No, I think the ROE were almost always, it was too much control.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's too much risk, almost always. And I say that because for most of the time when I was in Afghanistan on my first tour, we were operating on 429 Alpha, which we sort of colloquially describe that as warfighting ROE. See an enemy, armed enemy, you can kill them. I'm really generalizing here. So if someone's going to pull me apart and say I'm a war criminal, right? I haven't got the 429 Alpha in front of me, but it was kind of the most relaxed version. It was really rare for that to be issued. I was on it for most of the time in Afghanistan, in the places I was. Other units weren't. To answer the question, no, for the most part, they're not fair. They
Yeah.
really hamper us in terms of what we can and can't do. There were some for most of the guys and girls in Afghanistan on the second and third tour. Most of them were on a rule of engagement that said that even if you saw a Taliban fighter with a weapon in his hand, clearly identified as a Taliban fighter with a weapon in his hand, you wouldn't be able to shoot him.
Yeah.
You were not allowed to do it. You had to wait till that weapon was pointed at you. Then you had to go through a certain procedure before you could even pull the trigger on him.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. It's crazy. And I understand the reasons for having the ROEs like this, but that it was a legacy or carryover from Northern Ireland. Card Alpha for us, as we call that rule of engagement, was from Northern Ireland. So no, they weren't fair. But the problem is you've got to mitigate for idiots.
Yeah.
You've got to mitigate for people who are fucking trigger happy. And you've got to mitigate for people who don't understand the rules of engagement or don't have the brain processing power to be able to quickly think through the rules of engagement, whether they're right or wrong. Because they endanger themselves, mainly, if they don't know when they can and can't pull the trigger.
Yeah.
But it is frustrating for the majority of us who are quite capable of doing it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know, because we've talked to like JTACs who basically had to go through, a 15-page document to call in an airstrike.
Oh, you probably had to go through 15 layers of command at one point.
Yeah. So I thank you. Do you think you or your colleagues are owed anything for their service?
No, definitely not. No, not at all. Owed anything? No. It's nice to get some gratitude sometimes. Mainly, it's nice to not get it completely ignored. When we returned from Afghanistan in 2006, there was nothing. We made it quite a difficult reintegration.
Yeah.
So on later tours, when it was kind of known what Afghanistan was like at that point, a unit would come back from being overseas for 6 months. They'd come back and they'd have a big service. They get presented the key to the city and all of these formalities and the recognition. And when we came back, we didn't have any of that. And it was actually very different for me again because I came back later than everyone else. 3 para had already been back. I was stuck in Musa, Qala. Came back a few weeks later. I got picked up by a minibus in a commercial airport.
Yeah.
Because we came back in on. So no, I don't think we owed anything at all. And I think it's a mistake to think we owed anything. Does that mean that the public shouldn't feel obligated to demonstrate gratitude? Maybe. Yeah, I think the public should be obligated to do it, or even consider it, not demonstrate it, but actually think, okay, these people do a job and they are worthy of our admiration.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you think of what the military is doing in X or Y, Z, different place, be that Israel, be that Ukraine at the moment, be it Syria, be it anywhere else. That's only a small part of it. The reality is that without the military, whichever country you're in, without your military, then your country would not exist, and a stronger country would take it over, and you would not be living the life you live now.
Yeah, Hugh, here in the U.S., like we have the VA, the Veterans Administration, we have the hospitals, who it can be very inefficient, mired in bureaucracy, and has its own issues, but it is an organization that is there for the care and treatment of veterans. I know that you guys have your like national health care. So is there anything like that for you guys over there? Is there anything that where you are paid specific attention to for like post-traumatic stress or the issues the veterans might find themselves?
Yeah, there are fledgling organizations, government departments that are doing it. You got the OVA, the Office of Veterans Affairs. There's a few fledgling I say fledgling in, they're relatively young, but also fledgling in if they've been around for a while, they're not very well advanced. It's not great. Like you said, we have the advantage of the National Health Service and a few things that are coming over the last 5-10 years. As a veteran here, you'll get prioritized now.
Okay.
The health service, you can be, you book a doctor's appointment, then you can self-identify as a veteran if you want, and it can prioritize you. So that's good. But it's nothing like you guys got over there. But I think that's a cultural difference mainly, but also probably a lack of appetite in spending money where there's no tangible benefit for the ruling party,
Yeah.
I think if you could say, "Hey, do this," and it'll convert directly into votes for you, then they'd all do it. But in reality, they can't. They can't predict that, so they don't. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Sorry. RS, thank you very much. Sniper is now is out now on all digital platforms. So get yourself some Tom Berenger. Did you ever watch the Tom Berenger?
Yeah, years ago. Do you know, I think the last time I watched that was before I joined up, actually.
Hey, Sniper 10 is out with Chad Michael Collins. We've had him on the show. We'll have him back when Sniper 20 comes out.
Sully, thank you very much. Would you guys be willing to speak with your enemies, even those who killed people you knew?
Ooh. If he's not been recorded and no one's going to go looking for him after. It's a good question. You know, I mentioned Northern Ireland earlier, and that's so that Solly you're talking about there is the dual patron, yeah. And I think I've mentioned to him before about the potential of interviewing a Northern Ireland terrorist, reformed terrorist, and he's pointing me towards a Northern Irish terrorist who killed a bunch of people and has expressed remorse and wrote to the family and apologized. I do that. I think that I've got room in me for remorse and regret in terms of those kind of things. Now, interviewing someone who killed a mate of mine, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about that. Probably a no.
Yeah.
Hard no.
Yeah. Jack, do you have an opinion on that?
I mean, if it's somebody who killed somebody I knew, I mean, that makes it pretty personal.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to just
would.
overlook that.
Yeah.
But somebody who fought, like, let's say fought in Saddam Hussein's army against us, yeah, I'd interview the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sully, thank you. When is ex-SAS Ben Griffin next coming on both your podcasts? He claims the U.S. used his unit to torture civilians.
Who is this?
You got
Ben Griffin?
I don't know who that is.
Is this an inside joke?
No.
Oh.
Ben Griffin is a relatively well-known name over here in like pacifist circles.
Okay.
Ben was two para and then went to the SAS, and he co-founded the UK arm of Veterans for Peace over here. And I think Veterans for Peace is started up in America, but he chaired Veterans for Peace over here in the UK. Anyway, Ben is quite well known because he's done talks at. Have you seen when they do speeches at the Oxford Union?
No.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Yeah. So he's done a talk there about problems with our interventionist foreign policy and things like this. But he claims that he saw war crimes being committed by the SAS when he was serving with them in Baghdad, when he was out there with them in whatever year it was, 03, 04 maybe. I interviewed him 2018 or 2019, back when my views on things were very different then. Again, this is the advantages of talking to people long form. I think you form opinions much quicker. Like I probably would have waited till I was 70 or 80 years old to form the opinions I hold now. But in that conversation, he claimed that, and we locked horns on this. He claimed that in the British military, you could in Afghanistan just kill someone, anyone, just go and kill a civilian, and you get away with it, and there'd be no reprimand from it. Which is absolute nonsense, and it's nonsense in any unit. I think there's a chain of command and disciplinary procedure for a reason, and we get rules of engagement drilled into us for a reason, and we go through all the. I don't know about you. Over here we have these like virtual training systems where you'll be sat there in with like a weapon, but it fires lasers, and you'll watch a scenario unfold in front of you. Really complicated scenario, and it basically gives you a scenario where should you shoot the person or should you not? Is it within the area or is it not? It's really complex. You go through all the mental mathematics in your head. You got to go through to do it. We do that to ensure that we don't go killing people we shouldn't go killing.
Yeah.
And Ben thought differently, or thinks differently. Now, it was interesting with Ben Griffin is, and I highly recommend him as a guest. Actually, interesting with Ben is he's now no longer a member of Veterans for Peace. He now relaxes doing a very simple yet rewarding job up on an island off the coast of Scotland. He's still very much up for conversation, so he's coming back in, so we're going to revisit that conversation. I'm interested to go back and listen and see where my own opinions have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting guy.
Sully, thank you very much. When will Jack and Dave appear on the H-Hour podcast?
Anytime you want, boys. Anytime you want.
Yeah, whenever you're ready for us.
Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, maybe an in-person one. I'll come over and we can do it. We can
Even
do it
better.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
M. Corbin, thank you very much. How can American Soft make it culturally acceptable to have a beer fridge like you find chaps? Well, what do you guys have beer fridges?
We have what? Just generally, we have beer fridges. Yeah. Where are we talking about specifically?
I'm not sure.
I think he's talking about like in your unit. Does your platoon have a fridge of beers? And I don't.
The answer is yes.
I don't want to shock anyone, but there are some American units where that's a thing.
Yeah. D, did you see anything on the Patreon?
No, there's nothing.
Nothing. All right.
Hugh, one last thing, because as we were having this conversation, it got me thinking. I feel like I recall a story about a guy. He was either a para or a Royal Marine that went and joined the IRA.
I do not know that.
That doesn't
story.
ring any bells.
No.
It was like way back in the 80s. It was before any of our time.
No, I don't know that story.
Okay.
I can dig around for you though if you want.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that would be a fascinating story or a fascinating interview if the guy's still around.
And then we have one. I'm a former 2-para bullshit blue, unlike 3-para Gungy green. Hugh will know what I mean. Respect always, and thanks for your service, Hugh.
Yeah, so the battalions have their different. Thank you for that. By the way. The battalions have their different nicknames and mythical attributes. So 3-para, apparently we're really grungy, which means we're really dirty. We never wash, never bother with any of this. We never wash our uniforms, never wash ourselves. Grungy 3. That's what he's referring to. 2-para, he's referring to a bunch of. They're very straight. They like their processes. They don't like to think outside the box very much. I'm joking. I'm just riling him up. But yeah. And 1-para, weird, just odd people do odd things with broomsticks on the weekend when no one's looking.
Hugh, where can people go to find H-Hour?
The best place is charliecharlie1.com. So yeah, Charlie and then ONE.com is the best place to go, or just search for H-Hour podcast and you find it anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for your time today, guys. I really enjoyed.
Thank you.
Hugh.
We really enjoyed it too. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, awesome perspective.
It's difficult being in the guest seat. I forget. It's very challenging.
I actually find it comforting because I usually have to do the interviews. So when it's someone else's responsibility to have the questions and everything, it actually is a little relieving. I find. But next Friday we will be back with John Kiriakou, former CIA officer. Is he coming in studio, D? No, he's going to be remote. Okay. So we will see you guys on Friday. Hugh. Huh?
Eyes on.
Go check out Eyes On, our sister podcast with Andy Milburn and Jason Lyons. It is on its own separate channel now. Search for it on YouTube. There's a link down in the description. So we'll see everyone Friday. Hugh, thank you so much for spending your evening with us, especially for you. It's like probably 1 a.m. right now, right?
1:30.
1:30, yeah.
It's been a pleasure, so I'm not complaining. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for making the effort.
Cheers, guys. Stay safe.
All right, we'll see
Have a good
all of
one.
you next Friday.